Yes, sir.
Good morning, Mr. Wyatt.
Morning.
Would you please state your full name for the record?
Keenan Wyatt,
Mr. Wyatt, where do you live?
Thousand Oaks, California.
What do you do for a living?
Excuse me. I'm a sound technician on feature films.
How long have you been a sound technician on feature films?
Over 35 years.
Would you please briefly describe for the jury what a sound technician on films does?
Well, technically just do the dialogue recording while on the set, so it's as clean as possible.
Do you know Johnny Depp?
Yes, I do.
How do you know Mr. Depp?
I've known Johnny for over 25 years, and we're good friends.
Have you ever worked with Mr. Depp?
Yes, I have.
For how many of Mr. Depp's films have you worked with him as the sound technician?
Dozens of films.
Would you please just name a few of them for the jury if you can remember?
I've done the 5 Pirates of the Caribbean movies, Alice in Wonderland, Rum Diary, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, Ninth Gate, Lone Ranger, a number of films.
What part did Mr. Depp play in the 5 Pirates of the Caribbean movies?
Captain Jack Sparrow.
Are you, Mr. Wyatt, are you currently employed by Mr. Depp?
No.
Have you ever been employed by Mr. Depp?
No.
Have you ever been paid by Mr. Depp?
No.
Have you ever worked for any of Mr. Depp's companies?
Yes, I worked for Infinitum Nile.
When was the last time you worked for Infinitum Nile?
Last time I was there was probably 2017. I worked on a contract basis with them, not as an employee.
And would you very briefly describe for the jury what work you did for Infinitum Nile in 2017?
I ran the media library with them, did some archiving, recording, editing, things like that.
How would you describe briefly your working relationship with Mr. Depp in the 25 years or so that you've worked together?
Johnny's great to work with on films. He always comes very prepared and knows what he wants to do and makes it for a fun day when we're shooting.
With what directors have you and Mr. Depp worked together?
Oh, many directors. But we've done several films, multiple films with multiple directors, like Tim Burton, Gore Verbinski, Rob Marshall. We've done multiple films with them.
Why did you and Mr. Depp work with those directors more than once?
Johnny makes it easy to work with.
Foundation.
Your Honor, he's laid the foundation. He's worked with Mr. Depp for 25 years on more than 10 feature films.
And relevance.
No, I'll allow it. Good.
Thank you, Your Honor. Why did you and Mr. Depp work with those directors more than once?
Well, the directors like working for him. He comes
Objection,
with.
hearsay, move to strike.
Your Honor, you just allowed the question.
I'll allow it. Go ahead.
Johnny makes it easy to work with. He comes prepared. He knows what he wants to do with the characters, and he collaborates very well with the directors.
Is Pirates 5 one of the feature films on which you worked together with Mr. Depp?
Yes.
Was Mr. Depp ever late to the set on Pirates 5?
Yes.
Do you know why Mr. Depp was late on those occasions?
Well, arguing going on between him and Amber.
Objection, hearsay,
I'll
foundation.
sustain the objection.
Strike that. Did you communicate with crew members on the set of Pirates 5?
Every day, yes.
Was Mr. Depp's lateness a problem for the crew?
Objection, calls for hearsay.
All right, I'll sustain as to what the crew may have told him.
Well, I was just asking the threshold question of whether he had spoken with the crew.
You're right. I'll sustain the objection.
Putting aside occasional lateness on the set of Pirates 5, was production of Pirates 5 ever suspended for any period of time?
Objection, calls for hearsay, foundation. How would he know that?
No, if you can ask how he knew it, you want to lay the foundation. That's right.
How did you know whether production of Pirates 5 was ever suspended?
I was on the film. I was working on the film, so
Okay.
I know it was suspended probably for 2 or 3 weeks.
And why was it suspended for 2 or 3 weeks?
Johnny had to go back to Los Angeles because his finger had been cut off. Tip of his finger had been cut off.
Do you have any understanding of how Mr. Depp's, or the top of Mr. Depp's finger was cut off?
All right.
No, I don't know.
Okay. I'll return.
And I believe you testified that production was suspended for a period of 2 or 3 weeks. Did there come a time when Mr. Depp returned from Los Angeles to Australia for completion of the shooting of Pirates 5?
Yes, he did.
Who is Sean Bailey?
He's an executive at Disney.
After Mr. Depp returned to the set of Pirates 5 in Australia, what, if any, interactions did you observe between Mr. Depp and Mr. Daly?
Sean had come to set one day and sat and talked with Johnny for a while, and they talked about collaborating and doing some stuff in the future.
Was it a friendly conversation?
Absolutely, yes.
Has Mr. Depp ever worn an earpiece in any of the many movies in which you've worked with him?
Yes.
For what purpose are earpieces generally used by actors on sets?
Well, I've worked
Objection,
with...
Your Honor. First of all, relevance, foundation,
What's the relevance?
hearsay.
May we approach, Your Honor?
Okay, sure.
Mr. Wyatt, has Mr. Depp ever worn an earpiece in any of the movies in which you've worked with him?
Objection leading.
Yeah, I'll allow it.
And he already answered it anyway, but
That's okay. I'll allow it.
Yes, he has.
When was the first time you used an earpiece with Mr. Depp?
First time we used it was on a movie he was directing called The Brave. We were doing a scene with Marlon Brando, who wears an earpiece for receiving his dialogue.
objection.
I'll allow it. That's fine. Go ahead.
Marlon uses an earpiece for his dialogue, and it was a long shooting day, and we let Johnny, as the director, let Marlon go after we shot Marlon's section of the film, and then for Johnny's character to act against something other than just a blank nothing, we put Marlon's performance in an earpiece into Johnny so he could act up against Marlon's performance.
Did Mr. Depp ever use an earpiece for some other purpose other than listening to Mr. Brando's dialogue?
After that, we started using an earpiece all the time where Johnny would listen to music while acting. We would play all different kinds of music depending on the character he was playing. He and I would talk about it beforehand, and sometimes it'd be classical, sometimes it would be rock, sometimes it would be blues. It depended on the character.
To what extent, if any, did you and Mr. Depp use that process in other movies on which you worked together?
We used that on every movie.
Mr. Wyatt, on those occasions, in addition to feeding Mr. Depp music, did you ever read lines to him?
Yes.
Why did you read lines to Mr. Depp?
Johnny typically likes to go into makeup in the morning and write his own dialogue and rewrite his dialogue. So sometimes there's not enough time to always to remember the lines and learn them. So I would remind him in his ear sometimes while music was playing at the same time.
And Mr. Wyatt, in your long experience working with Mr. Depp on films, how would you describe his level of preparedness on the set?
He's absolutely prepared. He knows what he wants the character to be. He collaborates with the director on what his ideas are, but he always comes very prepared.
And Mr. Wyatt, during your long relationship with Mr. Depp, what, if any, opportunity have you had to observe his sense of humor?
Quite often.
How would you describe to the jury Mr. Depp's sense of humor?
He likes like a British humor. He's sometimes a little dark, maybe. He likes plays on words, that sort of thing.
Monty Python?
Monty Python, there's a show in England called The Fast Show, which he used to love watching.
Mr. Wyatt, what, if any, relationship do you have with Mr. Depp outside of your working relationship?
We're close. I used to, after a film, sometimes he'd call and I would go on vacation with he and his family.
On what occasions would you go on vacation with Mr. Depp and his family?
He would call after a film, and he would be going away with the kids and Vanessa, and he would say, "Hey, we're going to the island. Would you come with me?" and stuff. Or, "We're going to France. Would you come along?" And sure, why not?
Would you please give the jury Vanessa's full name?
Vanessa Paradis.
And would you please tell the jury who she is?
She is the mother of Johnny's two kids, Jack and Lily Rose.
And Mr. Wyatt, on how many occasions, if you can recall, did you accompany Mr. Depp, Ms. Paradis, and Johnny's two children on vacations?
Several times.
On those several occasions where you accompanied them on vacation, did you ever observe Mr. Depp and Vanessa interact with each other?
Sure, yes.
Would you please tell the jury what you observed?
They were a loving couple, and everything was fine. Yeah, it was a family.
Did you ever hear or see Mr. Depp yell or raise his voice at Vanessa Paradis, the mother of his children?
Not that I recall.
Did you ever, on any occasion, see Mr. Depp physically abuse Vanessa?
Never.
And I believe you testified, Mr. Wyatt, that Mr. Depp's and Ms. Paradis' children, Lily Rose and Jack, were there on those vacations. Is that correct?
Yes.
Did you have occasion to observe Mr. Depp's interactions with his children?
Sure, yes.
Would you please describe for the jury very briefly Mr. Depp's interactions with his children, Jack and Lily Rose?
He was a very loving father. He used to do stuff with the kids all the time, going swimming at the island and teaching them scuba diving and, just drawing, a lot of drawing, doing artwork.
Did he ever yell or raise his voice at his children?
Not that I recall. Nothing that stands out, no.
Mr. Wyatt, on what, if any, occasions have you seen Mr. Depp drink alcohol?
We'd drink alcohol quite often.
And on those occasions in which you had alcohol with Mr. Depp, how, if at all, did his behavior change?
I don't remember it changing at all. I don't remember him changing.
It didn't make him angry?
No. Sleepy.
Have you ever seen Mr. Depp use drugs?
I've seen him take pills. Don't know what they were. I wouldn't know what they were, but that's all.
Based on your observations, when you have seen him taking pills, how, if at all, did the taking of pills affect his behavior?
I didn't see any change in Johnny. I don't recall anything changing.
Mr. Wyatt, do you know the defendant in this case, Ms. Amber Heard?
Yes.
When did you first meet Ms. Heard?
On the set of Rum Diary.
On how many occasions, if at all, did you see Ms. Heard after that?
Several times.
Would you please describe for the jury very briefly your relationship with Ms. Heard after you saw her the first few times?
I mean, I don't really have a relationship with her. We didn't sit and talk. I didn't hang out with her or anything like that.
Did there come a time when you became aware that Mr. Depp and Ms. Heard were romantically involved?
Yes.
How often did you see Mr. Depp after he started the romantic relationship with Ms. Heard?
Oh, I don't recall. I didn't see him that often, but I don't recall how often, but I didn't see him that much.
How often were you together, strike that, how often did you interact with Mr. Depp and Ms. Heard when the two of them were together?
Just only occasionally did I see him. I mean, I would leave him alone, let him have his time with Amber. I wasn't into interfering.
And on those occasions where you interacted with Mr. Depp and Ms. Heard as a couple, did you ever hear Mr. Depp yell at or raise his voice to Ms. Heard?
No.
On what occasions, if any, did he ever raise his hand to or otherwise abuse Ms. Heard?
I've never seen him be violent towards anybody.
And if we could, did there come switch gears here, did there come a time in May 2014 when you traveled with Mr. Depp and Ms. Heard by private plane from Boston to Los Angeles?
Yes.
Who else was on that Boston plane flight?
It was Amber and Johnny, Stephen, Savannah, and Jerry Judge and myself.
And would you please tell the jury who is Stephen?
Stephen Duders is Johnny's assistant.
Who is Savannah?
Savannah was Amber's assistant.
And I think the jury has heard the name Jerry Judge, but if you could please explain to the jury again who Jerry Judge is.
Jerry Judge is Johnny's security.
Mr. Wyatt, why were you on that flight that night?
I don't know the exact circumstances of that flight. I didn't travel with the two of them that often. I was probably headed back to Los Angeles to see my daughter.
And before you got on the flight, how did you arrive at the airport that night?
We came in a car.
When you say you came in the car, with whom did you come in the car?
It was Jerry, Stephen, Nathan, Johnny, and myself.
And who is Nathan?
Nathan is Johnny's other assistant, Nathan Holmes.
What, if any, alcohol or drugs did you see Mr. Depp take while on the car ride to the airport?
On the car ride, I don't recall anything being taken. Johnny, I know, had called Jack during the car ride to talk to him, to tell him we were on our way, and we were listening to the World Cup that was going on at the time.
And if you could just remind the jury who Jack is?
Jack is Johnny's little boy.
When you and Mr. Depp and the security personnel arrived at the plane, who, if anyone, was there at the plane?
The plane had come from New York with Amber and Savannah already on it.
What, if anything, did you observe about Ms. Heard's behavior on that Boston flight?
Well, she was giving Johnny the cold shoulder, being quiet, and seemed pouty.
What, if any, conversation did you have with Ms. Heard on the flight?
At one point, I went up to her and said something to the effect of, he cares about you. And all of a sudden, she snapped and started yelling at me, "How dare you talk to me? Get away from me." So I went back to the seat and minded my own business.
When she said those things to you, would you describe the tone of her voice, if you remember it?
She was abruptly loud. It was a quiet plane. All of a sudden, it got very loud.
And I believe you testified you went back to your seat or you moved. What happened next?
Johnny had said something to her like, "Don't talk to my friend that way." And I just stayed in my seat and finished the rest of the flight.
And after you went back to your seat, to what extent, if any, were you able to see Mr. Depp and Ms. Heard?
I was able to see them very clearly.
What, if any, violence or physical altercation did you observe between Mr. Depp and Ms. Heard once you'd gone back to your seat?
I've never seen Johnny be violent towards anybody.
To what extent, if any, did you observe Mr. Depp or Ms. Heard hit, kick, or throw anything at each other on the plane?
No, I don't recall that at all.
Mr. Wyatt, was Mr. Depp consuming any alcohol on that flight?
Sure, yes.
Did he seem intoxicated?
seem intoxicated? No, he seemed like Johnny. No, he seemed normal.
Did there come a time, Mr. Wyatt, when you learned that Mr. Depp and Ms. Heard were getting married to each other?
Yes.
How did you find out about that there would be a wedding?
I was at the Infinitum office, and Christy came to me and said, hey,
I'm just asking, it's not for the proof, I'm just asking him how he found out about the wedding.
All right, what's the relevance of how?
May we approach, Your Honor?
Okay.
Mr. Wyatt, did you end up attending the wedding?
yes, I did.
Where was that? Where did the wedding take place?
There's two weddings, one at Betty Sue's house, Johnny's mom's house, and then another one on the island. The one on the island I did not attend.
What, if anything, did you observe at the Los Angeles ceremony that you attended at Betty Sue,
Betty
Mr.
Sue's
Depp's mother's house?
It was all very quick. I mean, we all found out about it at the last moment. There was a bit of confusion. Johnny had a friend from out of town, and she wasn't sure what was going on. Little Jack didn't understand what was going on.
I'll sustain as to other people. Go ahead.
What, if anything, did you observe about Ms. Heard's demeanor at the ceremony?
She was very happy-go-lucky. She was all dressed up. All of her friends were nicely dressed up and ready for a wedding.
Have you ever, in the course of your interactions with Ms. Heard, ever seen any marks, injuries, or bruises on her?
I have not, no.
During the decades that you have known Mr. Depp, to what extent, if any, are you aware of any woman other than Ms. Heard accusing him of abuse?
No, I'll allow it.
I've never seen Johnny abuse anybody, ever.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wyatt. That's all I have right now.
Why don't we go ahead and take our break? All right, let's go ahead and take our morning break for 15 minutes. Do not say anything, do not talk to me about the case, and don't look up anything. If a juror needs to address something to me, please write it down and give it to the deputy, okay? All right, thank you. You're excused. 15 minutes. All right, cross-examination.
Thank you, Your Honor. Now, Mr. Wyatt, you testified that you've been a sound technician for pretty much most of your career, right? Yes. Okay. And let's go to that Marlon Brando. He used an earpiece for his lines to be fed to him, correct?